Okay. Aubade and the Anatomy of Despair. It's a lovely way to start your morning. Sure you'll agree. Yeah, poetry is meant to be heard. So I'm going to start by just reading it without you having the text to distract you. Aubade. I work all day and get half drunk at night. Waking at 4 to soundless dark, I stare. In time, the curtain edges will grow light. Till then, I see what's really always there. Unresting death. A whole day nearer now, making all thought impossible, but how and where and when I shall myself die. Arid interrogation, yet the dread of dying and being dead flashes afresh to hold and horrify. The mind blanks at the glare, not in remorse, the good not done, the love not given, time torn off unused, nor wretchedly because an only life can take so long to climb clear of its wrong beginnings, and may never, but at the total emptiness forever. The sure extinction that we travel to and shall be lost in always, not to be here, not to be anywhere, and soon nothing more terrible, nothing more true. This is a special way of being afraid no trick dispels. Religion used to try, that vast moth-eaten musical brocade created to pretend we never die, and specious stuff that says no rational being can fear a thing it will not feel, not seeing that this is what we fear. No sight, no sound, no touch or taste or smell, nothing to think with, nothing to love or link with, the anesthetic from which none come round. And so it stays just on the edge of vision, a small, unfocused blur, a standing chill that slows each impulse down to indecision. Most things may never happen. This one will. And realization of it rages out in furnace fear when we are caught without people or drink. Courage is no good. It means not scaring others. Being brave lets no one off the grave. Death is no different whined at than withstood. Slowly, light strengthens and the room takes shape. It stands plain as a wardrobe, what we know, have always known, know that we can't escape, yet can't accept. One side will have to go. Meanwhile, telephones crouch, getting ready to ring in locked-up offices, and all the uncaring, intricate, rented world begins to rouse. The sky is white as clay with no sun. Work has to be done. Postmen, like doctors, go from house to house. I work all day and get half drunk at night. Has there been a more relatable opening line to a poem? They fuck you up, your mum and dad appeals chiefly to the self-aware, therapy-going middle classes. But Aubade's opening line resonates with most of us at some point in our lives. I work all day and get half drunk at night. Day after day, we work our jobs, then drink to relax or perhaps to numb. We try not to think as we click through the 4,000 weeks of an average life, self-medicating with booze to sleep more deeply, to avoid waking at 4 to soundless dark, to avoid our minds blanking at the glare from the gap between the curtains, the veil separating being from nothingness. I've already given you far too much to unpack on first hearing, unlike Larkin, who lays his thesis out line by simple line, blunt, each ending in plain yet invisible rhymes which knit the poem together into a sense of unavoidable logic, as inevitable as death itself. I want to talk about my personal relationship with Aubade. This is me at the age when I met it. How it came into my life nearly 30 years ago and affected me so deeply that lines of it constantly resurface. I will take apart, like a watchmaker, this poem pressed into being by the inexorable passing of time, show its inner workings, the elegance of its movement, and the imagery so blunt and inescapable that saying lines of it aloud still cracks me to tears. You'll notice I avoided crying this morning. I'm good. And I want to consider Aubade in relation to Larkin's early work, Jill, considering them as bookends to Larkin's literary career. Though I never met him, my relationship with Larkin feels personal. And I think that's true of a lot of people who come to love his poems. This is partly due to the way Larkin connects to the ordinary. His language is rarely elevated. His most famous poem for non-poetry readers is famous chiefly for the word fuck. Everyday language, they fuck you up, combined with profound insights into our shared human condition. A condensed, economical expression of what we instinctively feel but struggle to express. This is how Larkin's poems resonate so deeply with us that they appear at times to be saying what we have failed to find words for. Aubade is, for me, the crowning masterpiece of what Larkin does so well, embodying the full range of skills he developed in poetry and combining them with a lifetime of thinking about his deepest fear, a fear of death. Taking this poem apart shows us what he's doing again and again across his whole poetic corpus. The ordinary is hard at work in this poem. For the most part, the poem stays in plain registers, just as you would speak to a friend. I work all day and get half drunk at night, except notice that though the words are perfectly plain, monosyllabic even, the second half of that line is remarkably candid. Our problematic relationship with alcohol is usually hidden. And this is a dark truth of the kind that we often wouldn't say to a friend, except a very close and trusted one. And that is what Larkin, with this intimate honesty, becomes. But always alongside the ordinary, there is intellect and evidence of education, like the title itself. When I first met this poem in my mid-30s, I didn't know the word Aubade. The Poetry Foundation calls it a love poem or song welcoming or lamenting the arrival of the dawn. The form originated in medieval France. And yes, this poem is greeting the dawn, though love poem it is not. The lover so often found in classical aubades is painfully absent. The speaker wakes alone, and his relationship with the dawn is nothing as simple as either welcoming or lamenting it. Because this is the dawning realization of death, the fear that Larkin struggled with all his life. Going, his first poem on the subject, was published in 1946, the same year as Jill. Here is evidence of how he attempted the task before he'd had 30 years of practice. There is an evening coming in across the fields, one never seen before, that lights no lamps. Silken it seems at a distance, yet when it is drawn up over the knees and breast, it brings no comfort. Where has the tree gone that locked earth to the sky? What is under my hands that I cannot feel? What loads my hands down? There is no rhyme scheme here. There is an accidental near rhyme in yet and breast, but that's the extent of it. This is well-structured free verse, but Larkin has not yet mastered the formal devices that will give later poems so much memorability and power. The poem is loosely iambic in places, but not throughout. And this is probably a good place for a quick précis or refresher, depending where you're standing, on metrical feet. Little bit on poetic meter. The most powerful meter we have available to us as poets is iambic pentameter, the dominant meter of Shakespeare's plays and poems. A meter is made not of syllables, although people often talk about iambic pentameter as the decasyllabic line, 10 syllables, but it can have up to 13. It's my bugbear, this thing. Okay, can have up to 13. Even lines of Shakespeare have up to 13, and it's not a mistake, it's built in. So metrical feet are a pattern of 2 or 3 syllables. So pentameter has got 5 metrical feet. But 2 of those feet could have 3 syllables, for example, and you can have a hypermetrical syllable, then you end up with 13. So iambic pentameter in its most basic form, it has 5 iams. I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's a steady rising rhythm, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong. Then you have a galloping rising rhythm. That's an anapist. Did-it-dum, did-it-dum, did-it-dum. The opposite of an iamb is a falling 2-syllable foot, trochee. Dum-dee, trochee. And then the galloping falling rhythm is a dactyl. Dum-diddy, dum-diddy. A spondee is 2 strong syllables. Dum, dum. Don't have that on there. And a pyrrhic foot is 2 weak ones. Diddy. And you usually put those together. So you'd have 2 feet that will go diddy-dum-dum. Didum, didum, didum. Right. For a line to be read as iambic pentameter, the majority of the feet have to be iambs. So 3 out of the 5 have to be iambs. And we will hear it then as iambic pentameter with a little bit of variation, a little skip and a hop here and there. You don't need to hold on to any of this, because I'll illustrate what I mean as I talk about meter in Larkin's poetry. But they're just terms that I need to use, so I thought we'd have a little go of bringing them in. But these are how, it's really, meter is a huge part of how Larkin achieves his emotional effects. And the reason why his later poems, the more formal poems, like Aubade, are more emotionally affecting than Going. I'll return quickly to Going, because it doesn't actually affect us emotionally, I would argue. And I'd say that there are 3 reasons for this. One is a vagueness to the imagery. The other is the absence of rhyme. and the looseness of the meter is the third of these. The iambic rhythm here feels accidental. We speak in iambs quite naturally, but the lines in going are actually of varied length, and there are only 2 lines which can be scanned as the most powerful meter, iambic pentameter. The last line isn't metrical at all, and it gives the sense of just falling away. It's quite hard to scan that line anyway, what loads my hands down. You could feasibly argue it's 5 strong stresses, what loads my hands down, which is not meter at all. But you could also say, that's 2 spondies and a spare syllable. It's not really a meter. You can scan it with an iambic lilt, what loads my hands down. But to scan that, you have to either call it 2 iambs with a hypermetrical syllable, or you make this second metrical foot an unsatisfying compromise called an amphibrac. I always told my students you can't use amphibracs. If it scans with an amphibrac, it's not working. Don't do it. Either way, it ends on a weak syllable. So it feels quite literally like a falling away. You'll notice if you start scanning Larkin's most powerful poems, they will end in a strong syllable. It sort of lands in the final syllable, and this one doesn't. So these lines, being unpredictable, they just don't have the quality of music about them. They're missing that significant factor for stirring our emotions, because musicality does stir our emotions. It doesn't have the accessibility and the directness that we come to know as Larkin-esque. It alludes to something metaphorical, misty, vague, an evening coming in that lights no lamps. We could be mistaken for completely missing what he's alluding to. It is really English professors that have decided this is a poem about fear of death. And what is it that brings no comfort? I mean, surely this is a tentative negative, and it's squeamish. Surely if fear of death is being talked about here, if death is the thing that brings no comfort, surely it's much, much worse than bringing no comfort when you're looking at oblivion. Notice that what's missing are the objects surrounding a still present speaker, the tree, and again with vagueness, what is under my hands? Which could be anything from a pub table to a lover's body, but knowing Larkin, let's say a pub table. The speaker still exists in some sense. He still has hands, mentioned twice. He's not yet imagined his full obliteration or effectively expressed it. He's skirting around the edges, not daring to look extinction fully in the face. The answer to what loads my hands down is surely nothing, but the nothing is avoided. No such avoidance in Aubade. In stanza 3, he lays the nothing out in its entirety. This is what we fear. No sight, no sound, no touch or taste or smell, nothing to think with, nothing to love or link with. The last of those lines, nothing to love or link with, surely marking the absence of hands, if also not metaphorically, the heart. What 30 years of writing practice brought Larkin was directness, the ability to be absolutely blunt while still being poetic is a rare combination. It's the plain speaking a suicidal person needs. In Aubade, there's no tiptoeing around metaphors like going's an evening that lights no lamps. From line 5, he delivers his subject matter directly. We should go... No, it's the next one, isn't it? First stanza. Yeah. From line 5 in the first stanza, he delivers his subject matter directly. Unresting death, a whole day nearer now, making all thought impossible, but how and where and when I shall myself die. Explicit. And when he gets to the crux of his horror, he does 2 things. Firstly, he throws in a rhyming couplet. He does this twice in every stanza. The first 4 lines are an interlaced... where is it gone? Still on my screen. I heard a little, yes, no sight, no sound.
Yeah.
I heard a little click, did you?
If I just
Okay.
unplug it.
Oh, it's come back.
I think there's a little weak
Loose
connection.
connection, don't touch.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I was just going to look at the interlaced quatrain, the first four lines. So, night, stare, light, there. Very straightforward. A, B, true rhymes. True, masculine as they say, single syllable rhymes, ordinary language. Absolutely knocks your socks off. And then this couplet, when he gets to the crux of it, unresting death, a whole day nearer now, making all thought impossible, but how? So you've got a couplet, which really bangs it home. That is a clear thing that rhyming couplets always do. And he does it twice in every stanza. So line 7 of the first stanza, there's this minor disruption. He drops a syllable from the iambic line so that die sits alone. And where and when I shall myself die. Die is sitting in where the sort of metrical foot where 2 syllables should be, and it's occupying the whole foot. The metrical loneliness of that word is a shock, and the continuous rhythm of the iambs and life is disrupted in the moment he brings in that word die, and it gets worse, because after A, B, C, C, the last 4 lines are a closed quatrain, spaced out rhymes wrapped around another couplet, which is dread and dead. Has it gone again? Hang on, it's because I've got this here. Yes, it's dangerous, isn't it? Okay, it's back. I've got, my notes have all got confused now, sorry. Okay, yes, D-E-D. D-E-E-D is actually how you describe the rhyme. So A-B, C-C, and then D-E-E-D. Die, dread, horrify. And the second line of that couplet in every stanza is truncated. The first time we meet it, it's to deliver the dread of dying and being dead. And the short line emphasizes the bluntness of the blow. And every stanza repeats this structure in the penultimate line. 3 metrical feet each time, with an unpredictable pattern. Here it's logically scanned as I am, anapist, I am. And there he's been in the first lines of Aubade, going on in this reliable, steady iambic pentameter, familiar to us all, and then suddenly, like death itself, disruption in the meter. Notice how much more effective this is than the looser structure of going. Going isn't quite free verse. So the first 2 lines have tetrameter, then pentameter, then dimeter, 2 metrical feet. In the third stanza, this breaks down as if the meter of the first 2 was unintentional. On the page, the structure looks the same, but the first line of stanza 3 is only 3 metrical feet, not 4, and the second line is 4 rather than 3. And then you have the stray line at the end, of course. And you could say that's a kind of dissolving, dissolution, but Larkin isn't showing the absolute control of form that we see in Aubade, where death interrupts and genuinely shortens the steady rhythm of the lines. As we understand it, Aubade took 3 years to write. He worked on it from 1974 to 1977. The focus of this poem is unrelenting. His fear of death is pulled out of the freezer drawer and undergoes an autopsy. The precision of his literary scalpel cutting away the fat to the bare bones of the matter in stanzas 2 and 3. Lines that cut to the heart of me when I first met this poem. Not wretchedly because an only life can take so long to climb clear of its wrong beginnings and may never. He and I shared wrong beginnings that clung to us inescapably. And no, the difficulty of death is not that, but here come the absolutes with no looking away. The total emptiness forever, the sure extinction that we travel to and shall be lost in always. His focus is fierce. At no point in these central stanzas will we be let off the hook, not to be here, not to be anywhere, and soon nothing more terrible, nothing more true. The nothing banged home twice here, just as it is at the end of the next stanza, because it is nothing, the unconscionable obliteration that he can neither bear nor escape, that troubles him, an obliteration that is the clear cost of atheism. The consolation of faith isn't available to Larkin, and he rips it away from us in the next lines, where he describes religion as a trick, that vast, moth-eaten, musical brocade created to pretend we never die. There's a fascinating sensory injection in this imagery set against the nothingness he repeatedly invokes. We imagine music and almost smell the musty glimmer of aged brocade, which becomes, only in the most physical and deteriorated way, holy. But for Larkin, it is simply an ancient deception to make us imagine that we live beyond our body's demise. It is a pretense. And I want to use the idea of pretense to link to the theme of this conference, Larkin's first novel, Jill. It is fair to say that Jill is hugely about pretense. John pretends to be comfortable at Oxford, though he is clearly not. And he has not an ounce of the easy entitlement of his upper-class roommate, Christopher, and his friends. He pretends to be fine with his crockery being used without his permission and broken. He pretends to have more money than he does, lending out several weeks' food money that he can ill afford just to try and fit in. He buys a pretentious bow tie as if that will bring him the class that he lacks. He then pretends to have a sister, Jill, writes letters to himself that he can pretend are hers, writes her pretend diary. And this is where we slide into fiction. We watch John, unsatisfied with mere letters, create a whole world for Jill to exist in, as he starts writing the actual novel of Jill, embedded within a novel of the same name, that feels like it's wrong-footing us for half the book, since for over 100 pages we're simply waiting for the eponymous Jill to appear. And then when she does, she doesn't even exist. She is pretend. Women in general, and Jill in particular, are very notable by their absence in this novel. Oxford University is a male world where women only exist on the fringes. Christopher's mother coming for lunch, Elizabeth, who tries to be in with the boys but is despised by them, and the real-life Gillian with a G, whom John continues to call Jill with a J because his made-up version of a desirable girl, the girl who began as his sister, he now desires to make a girlfriend, is more important to him than reality. The fiction of Jill is entirely a device to increase his status with the upper-class young men of Oxford, to whom he is a figure of fun. He may be pretending to himself that he is smitten with Jill because he lacks the self-awareness to remember her origins. But when his aim becomes to successfully coerce her into some form of sex, it is purely to try and gain the respect of his male peers. Everything is pretense and show, like the impressive spires themselves, which give the lie to a superior education, a superior intellect, when very few undergraduates bother to study at all, and when, as John's former teacher, Mr. Crouch, accurately and depressingly advises, you can get a better job for 10 minutes social climbing than from 10 years hard work. And John is not the only one pretending. He is surrounded by pretension. His roommate Christopher, for example, pretends to be considerably more important and wealthy than he actually is. And he is boorishly unsophisticated. The woven fictions collapse at the end of the novel with the physical wake-up call of John being unceremoniously dumped into a fountain for being a sex pest, stroke stalker, and the very real consequences of that dunking, bronchial pneumonia. But through the whole novel, we live in this incredible disconnect from reality. It's very normal for a person in their early 20s, as Larkin was when he wrote Going and Jill, to spend a great deal of time in pretense, partly to armour themselves against a hostile world, and partly to fit in, if that's possible. And many people stay there because pretense is more comfortable, including pretending that we'll never die. My stepmother, even with a fatal diagnosis, and even in her last 3 days in a hospice bed, refused to discuss her funeral arrangements, telling my half-brother she thought she was going to get better. But Larkin didn't live in pretense. He began facing up to his mortality, stripping away all pretense and using the most direct language he could muster, a whole decade in advance of his going. He is no longer satisfied by the oblique expression of the earlier poem and the complex, multi-level, dissatisfying fictions of Jill, which focus on the young man's obsession with status rather than the older man's obsession with extinction. The poet's eye operates in Jill. We notice it in the precise observation of characters and the descriptions of the buildings at different times of day. But what Jill lacks, and what makes Larkin much more of a poet than a novelist, is focus. Yes, of course, let's forgive it for being, as Larkin describes, juvenilia, but it does keep drifting away from its centre until you don't really know what the centre is. We slide into an entirely different novel, Jill's novel, something like a Mallory Towers adventure, which is abandoned, unfinished. We slide into a long section of backstory from the perspective of John's teacher, Mr. Crouch. And eventually we lose sight of John too. Our close third-person relationship with him vanishes into an omniscient narrator. Christopher and his chums carry him into the darkness, while we remain with the two young women on the stairs. We only hear his fountain dunking as a splash in the distance. We meet him briefly again in his fever dreams as he lies in the infirmary, more pretense, more make-believe, a whole life imagined to the end of his non-existent relationship with Jill. And then we walk down the corridor with the infirmary's nurse, briefly witness his parents, who've come to see the reality of the illusion they've been spun. And after a last glance at Christopher and Elizabeth, we end with a growling dog. The narrative just slides away to something small, annoyed and wordless. No idea what this technical problem is.
Doesn't seem to be connected to this. I don't know if it's on microphone.
Okay. I think Larkin had something to say about my critique. Sorry, mate. Love your poetry. There is no sliding away in Aubade. Focus is the poet's great skill, arranging words within a space small enough to contain a single idea and take that idea apart without flinching. A novel is not a series of observations, however accurate, and the form didn't really suit Larkin. What he needed repeatedly was a brutally honest petri dish. Jill had been accepted for publication before his first collection of poems was, even though the poems, The North Ship, were published 3 months ahead of the novel. Considering Jill and Aubade as bookends to Larkin's literary career, another shift becomes strongly apparent: Larkin's relationship with the ordinary. It's not unreasonable, given the parallels in circumstances, to read Jill's protagonist, John, as a thinly veiled version of Larkin himself. And when it comes to those things we might deem ordinary, including John's humble roots, he is ashamed of them and hides them. He's uncomfortable getting too close to the other scholarship student with working class roots. By the time he writes his last major poem, Aubade, Larkin has fully owned the ordinary. It has become his greatest strength, and he leans into it. In stanza 4 of Aubade, there is a whole section of what sounds like kitchen table wisdom. Most things may never happen. This one will. Sounds like something a parent would say over a plain tea of bread and jam. As does, courage is no good. It means not scaring others. Being brave lets no one off the grave. There is an echo of a chiding mother saying, don't whine. In that final line, death is no different whined at than withstood. And furnace fear is surely a working class reference point. The middle classes don't tend naturally towards thinking of the working reality of furnaces. The sheer plainness of Larkin's diction has so much more reach and universal resonance than higher registers, and he combines this with compression that simply skewers you, blunt and inescapable. But Larkin does offer relief in the final stanza. Yes, the fact of death stands plain as a wardrobe. This fact that we know, have always known, know that we can't escape, yet can't accept. The light arrives, and the ordinariness of our surroundings saves us from further rumination. Even while one side will have to go, echoes Oscar Wilde's last words. Meanwhile is the pivot out of thinking about final words and rewaking to the everyday world, this intricate, rented world, as he puts it, with personified telephones crouching and getting ready to ring. The world uncaring of our personal small hours struggles with mortality. If the sunless sky is monotonously white, dull as the clay we may be buried in, we can at least bury ourselves for now in the distraction of work. And there is the consolation of human connection, which Larkin so specifically mourned the loss of in the lines, nothing to love and link with. As postmen like doctors go house to house ministering to our mental health by delivering in the 1970s, when this was written, personal letters, like those Larkin regularly received from his mother. In Mark Ford and Seamus Perry's discussion of this poem for the London Review of Books, Seamus Perry criticises these lines, saying that nothing to think with, nothing to love or link with, doesn't seem like Larkin at the top of his game. But to me, this misses the impact of the relentless deletion that these lines are working through. Having obliterated all five senses, Larkin also removes thinking, love, and connection, leading us to the brutal closing metaphor, the anaesthetic from which none come round. And here I must declare my personal relationship to this poem, which I've hinted at throughout, why perhaps I have a very different response to stanza 3 than Seamus Perry does. I suspect he has never stood facing the abyss of his own death, and in a moment where suicide started looking like blessed relief, drunk a bottle of wine and read these lines out loud to an empty room. Perry is coming at Aubade from a purely academic and intellectual standpoint, in which he might perhaps judge the feminine mosaic true rhyme, think with, link with, as somewhat clunky and perhaps imagistically vague. But to someone contemplating death, these lines drive a nail into the heart of the matter, emotionally skewer you, and will not let you wriggle free. This is how Aubade saved my life. When death was looking fatally attractive, these lines were lifelines. I clung to them as reasons for living when, frankly, even my own children weren't quite enough. The sheer brilliance of this poem proved to be my buoyancy aid. Its lines spooled out to me like rope across dark water to tug me back to safety. This is the reason why I can recite most of it from memory, even though I never deliberately learned it. This poem was a friend to me for months. We can be as analytical as we like about meter, rhyme, and imagery, And certainly these devices make Aubade much easier to memorize than other lengthy poems. But the true value of lyric poetry is its emotional effect, its ability to sit close with us in our darkest hours, to take our metaphorical hands in the poet's hands and lead us through the dark night of the soul towards the crack of light at the curtain edge, and then the relief of dawn. The comforting, ordinary rhythms of the world waking up and going about its business, letting us know we are not unique in this pain. We are not alone.